Yo, what is up, doggies? It's your boy Beanie Kowloon back at it on the YouTube. In today's video, I want to talk about my first time ever tripping sack on acid. And before I start this story, I just gotta say, I do not support the use of any illegal substances. And just because I've done these substances in my past and, probably plan on doing a couple of them in my future, does not mean that you guys should partake in these illegal substances. Regardless if you think psychedelics are safe both physically and mentally, it's still a very powerful drug that's, not to be messed around with. But shit, dog, with that disclaimer out of the way, let me get into my story of my first time ever tripping sack on LSD. This story begins when I was still just a yee lad. I was a freshman in high school, just bulling around with my friends, causing shenanigans, smoking weed, just having a good time. And on one of these days out with the boys, just having a good time, I remember one of my friends who had an older brother who was also into drugs, and considering he was older, he was starting to get into some, a little bit crazier drugs past the marijuana. And I remember my friend just telling me about all these crazy drugs that his older brother had done, and me not really knowing much about drugs at this time, I haven't even heard of 95% of these drugs. And one of the drugs that he explained to me that his brother had taken before was a drug called LSD, and I had no idea what this was. And my friend roughly explained it to me. He told me it's like a drug that just makes you see shit, it's a psychedelic and you can't die from it, all this shit. And in my head, hearing about this drug that, puts you in another world that you literally can't die from, I was like, yeah, I need to try that right away. From that point on, I made it my mission to find myself some LSD. Like, literally everyone I would meet, I would ask them if they know where I could find some acid. And I had another friend who I'm just gonna call Rob for the sake of the story, but this friend was also super down to try some LSD and also down on the hunt for some LSD. So now me and my friend Rob are both simultaneously looking for some acid, so like it's only a matter of time before we find some. And to be honest, we didn't really make any progress finding any LSD for the first couple months, no luck. But then, just like that, Halloween came around. And me and the dogs, we're going out for Halloween, having a hoot and a holler, having a good time. And at one point of hanging with the dogs, I remember me and Rob strayed away from the group at one point to go smoke with a bunch of older upperclassmen. And I didn't really know 90% of these upperclassmen, but that didn't really matter to me. I was just trying to smoke some weed. And we roll up a couple blunts, we start smoking, everything's good. But while we're smoking on these blunts, my boy Rob, he decides to ask one of these upperclassmen if he knew where we could find some acid. And what do you know it? This upperclassman had a buttload of acid on him right then. I think my boy Rob bought 5 tabs of acid or something like that. Because I remember the first time we tripped, I did trip with 2 other people and we all took a third of a tab. But that story's not really worth sharing because, we were barely even tripping. I was still kind of off this planet, but I wouldn't consider that a full LSD experience. So for the sake of the story, I'm just going to skip past that part of the story and get right into when we decided to drop a full tab of acid. So it was probably a couple weeks after this acid was copped that we decided to actually drop it. And I had my boy Rob over to my crib, and we both together dropped these tabs of acid at some time around 11 o'clock. Me and the boy Rob decided to just chill out and play some Call of Duty and wait for this acid to kick in. And I remember the acid felt like it took forever to kick in. And before I took this acid, I had done quite a bit of research on the internet of what to expect from LSD. I watched a lot of psych substance videos, some drug classroom, just a lot of videos about LSD and what to expect when you take it. And I remember one of the main things I heard people say was when you close your eyes, you're gonna see a bunch of crazy patterns when you first start tripping. And I remember waiting for this acid to kick in, I just kept closing my eyes waiting to see something. And then one of the times I closed my eyes, I was just set into another dimension. It's hard to describe what the visuals look like, but it's wild. I remember seeing all this cool stuff and it got me hyped up, and I told my friend, I'm like, yo, close your eyes, bro, you're gonna see so much cool shit. But the dog Rob, he would close his eyes and then he would claim he was just seeing nothing, which in hindsight, I don't really believe because I'm pretty sure we were both tripping by now. And I'm starting to notice shit looking wacky, not just with my eyes closed, but with them open. Everything's starting to look really interesting. Me and the dog at this point decided to watch some trippy music videos. I don't really remember entirely what we watched, but I remember we just mostly watched Travis Scott. I remember watching Goosebumps about 50 times. But then the dog Rob, out of nowhere, just grabs the controller and starts looking up scary alien abduction video. And the dog just clicks on this 20+ minute video of an ASMR alien abduction trying to simulate what it's like to be abducted by aliens. And clearly this being my first time dropping acid, it's his first time as well, I don't want these fucking bad vibes going on. This shit's fucking spooking me. But then also at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm also at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a bitch and say I don't want to watch this, but at the same time, I'm all trapped in my head. I'm like So I just sat there and we watched this shit for like 5 minutes long of just some spooky ass alien noises, and then my dog finally decides to turn it off, and I'm just like, alright, we're done with that. And it's at this point, which is still like kind of the beginning of the trip, where everything starts going a bit off. I remember some point during the beginning of this trip around this time, like, you know, mostly the visuals and stuff I was seeing was all cool shit, you know, I was all happy about it. But every once in a while, I would see just like my whole family just standing over me, like really tall, just like looking down at me, and it just looked like they were all ashamed of me. And that shit made me feel no bueno, but luckily this was like barely a part of my trip, and I could kind of pretty easily get past this and forget about it. But another issue that arose within like the first hour of us both tripping is the dog Rob, he really wanted to smoke some weed. And you know, I think the dog wanted to smoke weed so badly because, you know, he was having a bad time on the acid, and in his head, if he smoked weed, it would make it a better time because normally when he's sober, smoking weed makes him happy. But I had known at the time from my research of people talking about LSD and smoking weed on it, everyone warned me not to do it and said it will just make you trip way harder. If you're having a difficult time, you shouldn't smoke weed. I think I tried to explain this to my friend, but I clearly just didn't do a good enough job because this man was dead set on smoking some weed. And the thing is, we did have weed. We had a whole ass half ounce of weed that, you know, he had to give me because he owed me a half ounce previously. It was a long story. I basically just fronted this dude a bunch of money. I regretted it. But yeah, he was giving me this half ounce of weed we had, but you know, first he wanted to smoke some of it. The only issue is us being in 9th grade, we had no way to actually smoke this weed. We didn't know how to roll, nor did we have shells or anything like that. So the only idea we had was to go smoke out of an apple, which is what I used to always do. But the issue was, I really didn't want to go upstairs and grab an apple because both my brothers were awake, and like, I just really didn't want them to see me when I was tripping on acid because they 100% would have known that I was tripping on acid. I was very fucked up. And this is where me and my dog get into the worst thought loop that I've ever fucking been in while tripping on psychedelics. And I was also in it with another person, which makes it kind of crazy. And if you don't know what a thought loop is, it's basically one of like the most common bad things that can happen to you on a psychedelic, and it's basically where you just keep rethinking about the same thing over and over again. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I found this video on YouTube that portrays a thought loop perfectly in my opinion.
Dude, you have already had all these thoughts.
Okay, so I'm in a thought loop. I'll think of something else.
You've already tried that and there was nothing else. You gotta ride it out. Oh.
Okay, but I've already thought of that. Yeah, dude, because you're in a thought loop.
Oh, okay, well then I'll just think of something else. No, you gotta ride it out.
So yeah, me and my friend are stuck in a thought loop about me arguing why I don't want to go upstairs because my brothers will see that I'm tripping. And then my friend would ask, oh, but like, why do you care if they see that you're tripping? And then I would have to explain because, you know, like, I just don't want my brothers to think that I'm doing all these harder drugs. And then he would just go right back. He'd be like, alright, but why don't you just go grab the apple? And I shit you not, this went on for around like 3 hours long. Like, I am not exaggerating. Like, I remember we kept getting up, walking into a different room, and then we would just have the exact same conversation we had, and then we'd be like, alright, we gotta go back to this main room in my basement. We would go back to the main room, have the exact same conversation, be like, alright, we gotta go back to this weight room, go to my weight room, have the exact same conversation, all for like 3 hours fucking long. And during this whole 3 hours, my brothers are still just wide awake talking upstairs, which is the whole issue of why I can't go up there. But at one point, I decide I'm just like, hey, fuck it, dude. I'm gonna grab the apple. It's the only way to end this situation, this thought loop that we're stuck in. I just need to get this fucking apple. So I'm off. I go to grab this apple, and I'm just hoping, I'm praying to God, just maybe my brothers, you know, they just won't talk to me. Maybe they won't notice me. What do you know, literally the second I open up the door, one of my brothers calls out my name, asking me if I know how to hook up like this PlayStation 4 upstairs, and I am in no state of mind to hook up any kind of console, so I just ignore him and go right to the refrigerator. But you know, not being mentally in this realm, I didn't understand if I just ignored my brother, he's not gonna just forget about me. My brother ended up getting up, walking over to me, attempting to talk to me, but I'm just focused on grabbing this apple. So I just grab this apple, I look at him, and you know, he looks over at me, he goes, "You're grabbing an apple right now?" Because it's like 3 in the morning. And at this point, I just looked at him, I looked at my apple, and I just said the word apple, started laughing, and then I walked downstairs. Without a doubt, I appeared that I was on some drugs to my brothers, which is what I was trying to avoid, but on the bright side, at this point, I was back into the safety of my basement, and now I had an apple. So me and the dog start loading up some bowls, which in hindsight, probably not a good idea, as this has been kind of a stressful trip, and now we're coming on to nearly like the peak of it, and this is just now when we decide to start to smoke some weed. And well, you know, that's exactly what we did. We go over into my weight room, we open up the windows, and we start packing bowls out of this apple. And smoking this weed, you know, all it really does is just blast us off a lot more, which is something we really did not need. So after we get done chiefing, we go back to the main part of my basement, and we hook up the Call of Duty, and we decide, you know, hop back into that Call of Duty grind. And during this process of like loading up the Call of Duty, something very weird happened to me that I've never experienced in all my years of tripping sack. I saw like hundreds of these little blue creatures with really big butts, like all stacked behind each other, like kind of in that mirror effect. If you see two mirrors like back to back and you hold your hand up and you see like hundreds of your hands all by each other, they were doing that effect. And then also every word that I would think, like every sentence I would think about like, whoa, this is really cool, they would echo the last word I would say, like cool, just in a higher pitched voice. They would be like, that was really cool, that was really cool, that was really cool, that was really cool. And I'm just still at a loss of words just even thinking about this, because like I've tripped a lot of psychedelics, and you know, sometimes even on like a very high amount. I've never seen nothing like this, where you literally see creatures form out of nowhere that are like talking to you. Like, that's not some shit I'd say you should expect to happen to you if you're tripping sack. Like, I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was just because I was like 15 years old and my undeveloped mind was just creating these little blue people. Who fucking knows? Basically, after I get done partying with the blue people and, you know, they just disappear, you know, I start gaming out with my dog on Call of Duty, and we're having the time of our lives. We're playing World War II on this one boat map. We were both just sitting in the back with snipers, just sniping the fuck out of these fools. And I remember every dude that I sniped, I thought I was having like a 5-on 5-man collateral, because I kept seeing like this mirror effect of like 5 people dropping dead. So I thought I just sniped like 5 people. I thought I was popping off. But yeah, basically we're having a good time gaming for a bit, but then, just like that, the dog decides to start switching it over to Black Ops 3. And every time he would switch it to Black Ops 3, I would switch it back over to World War II, and these loading screens just felt like they took like 10 hours long. Like, we felt like we were doing this for like hours upon hours. For some reason or another, we just couldn't come to an agreement, and it was really causing some issues during this trip. So we're both just sitting there switching the game back and forth, and I would say this is probably like the peak of my trip, because I remember at this point, all I could say was just like, no, no. And I remember during this point of just shouting out no, trying to switch it back to COD World War II, I remember I just felt like my vision was getting like ripped apart, and I could see this little like blue line and a little red line on either sides of my vision, and it was just ripping my vision like more and more, so I could see more and more, and it felt like I was the blue guy and my dog Rob was the red guy, and you know, it was just tearing me apart. And then not much more really happened after this, although we did get into one final thought loop argument about the weed, because he had a ½ ounce of weed that he owed me, that he had to give me, and for some reason the dog was just not understanding that he had to give me his weed. Like, I was like, so you do understand you owe me a ½ ounce of weed? And he's like, yeah. I was like, and you have a ½ ounce of weed right now? And he's like, yeah. I was like, so it's my ½ ounce of weed? And he's like, no, it's my weed. It was like the fucking Man Ray and Patrick meme where he doesn't understand that it's his ID. It was pretty funny in hindsight, but it was really annoying me. But I did end up helping him understand that it was my weed, and I finally convinced him, and he gave me the weed, which was pretty hype. And really, not too much more happened after this. I remember I tried going to sleep at like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, something like that, and it was just way too early to go to sleep. I was seeing so much shit, but I didn't really care. For the last 2 hours of my trip, I just laid there with my head down, just staring into the Odyssey. So yeah, that was my first time ever tripping acid. Was not a great experience, considering me and the homie were arguing the whole time. And the dog did later end up telling me that like during this trip, from his perspective, he literally thought that I was trying to like record him and turn him over to the police, because at one point I accidentally hit the share button on my PlayStation, and you know, it was recording us. So this dude thought I was literally recording him and was gonna like turn this over to like his parents or something and tell him that he was tripping sack. And he told me like this was the reason that he didn't want to give me the weed, and he was so confused about all this shit, which in hindsight makes a lot of sense. If you've never tripped, it could sound like he's just saying some nonsense like, yo, none of that shit that he's saying makes any sense. Why the fuck would you be recording him? Clearly that's not logical. But the thing is, when you're tripping acid, all the rules, they go out the window. Just everything about life that's normally makes sense no longer makes sense. And it's very possible that you can just start having some otherwise absurd thoughts that you would never believe in, that you could fully believe is true while tripping sack. You gotta be careful with these compounds, man. They'll do some wild shit to your head. And basically, the moral of this story is, don't take fucking acid when you're a freshman in high school. Wait, just wait a little bit longer, dog. Well, that's my story of my first time tripping sack on acid, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, shit, dog, you ever hear of the like button, the subscribe button, the comment button? Fucking hit them shits, man. I'm trying to get this channel popping, dude. We done messing around. Beanie Kowloon, what the fuck are we doing at under 1,000 subscribers? I'm kinda confused. Fucking boost those numbers, doggies. And as always, peace out, doggies.